Good morning.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You're all welcome to this maiden edition of the ICSAN Lagos Chapter Learning Hall, where we will be discussing the topic, Sex in the Boardroom, Ground Rules for Managing Hormones, Attractions in the Corporate Space. I will now invite the chairperson of the Lagos State Chapter Education Committee, Mrs. Noye Izuobi, to officially welcome our participants.
Thank you, Shola. The 29th President and Chairman of Council, ICSAN, Mrs. Fumi Ekundayo, FCIS, Vice President, Mrs. Uto Opana, FCIS, the Treasurer, Mr. Francis Olawale, FCIS, the Chairman, ICSAN Lagos State Chapter, Mr. Olufemi Shokon, FCIS, other executive members of the Lagos State Chapter, past presidents present online, members of Council, fellows of the Institute, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the maiden edition of the ICSAN Lagos State Chapter Learning Hub. Our objective is simple: to provide a dynamic platform for members to enhance their knowledge, engage in thought-provoking discussions, and stay at the forefront of industry trends. The chosen topic for our inaugural session, titled Sex in the Boardroom, Ground Rules for Managing Hormones, Affections and Attractions in the Corporate Space, underscores our dedication to addressing contemporary issues in the professional world. It reflects the evolving landscape of corporate governance and the need for thoughtful conversations on navigating complex challenges in the workplace. As we embark on this enlightening journey together, we encourage active participation and open dialogue. I am certain that our distinguished speaker and discussants will be happy to answer your questions. Let us embrace this opportunity to learn from one another and contribute to the advancement of our profession. Once again, a warm welcome to the ICSAN Lagos State Chapter Learning Hub. We're excited to have you here, and we look forward to an engaging and productive session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. At this juncture, I'd like to warmly welcome our chief speaker and our two discussants for today. First on my list is Mr. Uche Uwechia. Mr. Uche Uwechia, apologies, is a legal practitioner and also an associate member of the Institute. He is a lead consultant and chief executive officer of Arete Dunamis Corporate Consulting Limited. You're welcome, sir. Second on my list is Mrs. Omobola Makinde. She's a fellow of this institute. She's also the company secretary of Greenwich Merchant Bank Limited. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Last but not the least on our list is Chief Adewale Adeniji. He's an associate member of this institute. He is also an associate member of the Chartered Institute of Taxation and a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, UK. He is the general partner at Adewale, Adeniji & Co. You are welcome, sir.
Thank you so much.
And I, Olushola Adeniran, I'm a legal practitioner and an associate member of this institute. I am the company secretary and general counsel of Princely Estates Limited, and I'll be your moderator for this session. But before we go on, I'd like to set some ground rules. Our participants can drop the questions in the chat box and we'll take it at intervals. And please kindly mute the mic to avoid distractions. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining this discussion. I will now yield the mic to our chief speaker and discussants for today, Mr. Uche Uwechia. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Shola, and thanks everybody for finding the time to join this maiden edition of our Learning Hub discussion. As many of you will agree, the topic itself may appear a bit controversial and is not the type of thing normally you will hear in a conversation talking about corporate governance. But if you listen to the introductory comment by the president of ICSA Lagos Chapter Education Committee, Noye. She spoke about the need for us to come out of hiding and to begin to discuss issues that are currently affecting and impacting governance. Because if we don't discuss them, then we'll be chasing the symptoms and not the very root cause of a lot of challenges we are having today. So it's my pleasure to set the tone on the topic, sex in the boardroom, ground rules for managing the hormones, affections, as well as attraction in the corporate space. I will start by pointing us to a very interesting research work done by Carl Aquino and a team of other 4 researchers titled Social Sexual Behavior at Work. In that research work, they recognize, after a lot of interviews, that organizational leaders, even scholars, regard sex or sexual behavior in the workplace as deviant, harassing in nature, and not something that should be discussed at all. In fact, it's something that organizations must eliminate so that, in their view, there's no distraction so that the employees can maximally perform. However, we know that regardless of the perception by organizational leaders, as well as scholars, that the opposite is the reality, that it is an sexual behavior is an inescapable feature of human interaction, especially in the corporate environment where you have people coming together day after day, week after week, month after week, often working in close proximity, especially members of the opposite gender. Another author, Berevsky, in her book, Sex and the Office, traced the history of sexual culture to the time when women, especially during the Second World War, women became, because the men had gone to war and there was a need to do a lot of production to back up the war economy, women began to be recruited in great number from the homes or from the schools where they teach to work in factories and to work in companies. And so it became a new issue and became part of the organizational landscape and became an issue that up to today, we are still looking at it. Now, historically, a scholar by name Weber, many of us who have some exposure to psychology and behavioral theories know Max Weber. He saw sexual behavior as violating the bureaucratic ideal whereby employees are expected to act in accordance with their depersonalized occupational roles. In other words, Weber was of the view that when you come to work, you drop your hormones, you drop your affections, you drop your attraction outside. And as you come in, just like the equipment and the machine are neutral, they are neither male nor female. You go there to work, and work you must. And if you deviate from it, sexual behavior in the workplace was seen as irrational. It was also seen as something that should be relegated to the private sphere, and that the commingling of personal occupational role with personal relationship will create conflict of interest, which, as we know, will bring about a lot of challenges. It will impact performance. Take, for example, if we allow conflicts in, it means that promotion, advancement in the place of work, allocation of resources will no longer be based on what you call pure objective criteria. Rather, it will now be running on basis of bond, maybe of kinship, of tribe, of connections that are not measurable and visible. And to a great extent, we'll all agree that Weber's view has a lot of merit. And as of today, we know that organizations have, and even the society, through legislative intervention, has assumed the draconian position in terms of legislating against anything that they feel will bring about that kind of conflict of interest, especially when it has to do with intimacy and sexual behavior of individuals working in an organization. Having said that, we realize that notwithstanding those draconian measures, we still see that that issue is still there. As somebody recently said, we may ignore it, but it is the elephant in the room. That's why it's important that at such a time like this, we as ICSAN Lagos chapter believe that our role is to dig up these underlying issues that are affecting governance, but which organizations, due to cultural taboos, are feeling that this is too difficult. We can't talk about it, sex, those three-letter words, but we know that where 2 or 3 people gather together and they're members of the opposite gender, it takes a lot of self-discipline and transparency for people to be able to operate without coming under the influence of affections and attractions. So that's why we are talking about it. I want to say that the issue of sexual intimacy or sex in the boardroom is something that we must avoid demonizing. Because if we demonize it, then we'll not be able to look at it to see, are there possibilities or some advantages under certain circumstances? Again, we should avoid weaponizing it. It should not get to the point where some people enter the corporate environment with the aim of using it as a weapon to bring down or to blackmail or to disrupt corporate activities. Because I can tell you that I've had an experience. Some years ago, in one of my places of work, we recruited a youth copper. We have not been recruiting youth copper, but we felt that our organization is one that can provide very, very great opportunity for somebody. If you do youth service with the organization for 1 year in the legal department, you almost be, you know, like, because you will do everything, we'll give you the opportunity. So we did. And as our culture is an open environment, we took this youth copper and introduced her to all the leadership up to the managing director. And we made it very clear that you have the freedom to engage with everybody, with anybody. I can tell you that the experience was a nightmare because everything was like, if you say hello, it will be seen as if you have made a sexual advance. And we had to take fast action to restore order in the department. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this to say that while we recognize that in leadership position, in positions where you have managers, directors, and other people in place of authority, it's very important for them to be aware that it is a red flag, that is something to be careful about when you begin, your hormones begin to work, or when you begin to feel, oh, I'm attracted to this. Remind yourself that there are rules and there are things that need to be taken care of. But having said that, we think also that it's important to highlight, where necessary, the potential benefits and, of course, the drawback in engaging in social sexual behavior at work, rather than adopting the perspective that every of such engagement is useless and harmful. And that is why we want to encourage us to have an open mind. I know we have our positions, but let's, as matured people, looking at the utilitarian good and the benefit of the entire organization, be able to have a proper discussion so that we can come to conclusions as to whether there are benefits or not. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Uwechia. We appreciate your contribution. Now, I'd like to ask this question. What connects people in the workplace that may give rise to intimacy?
That's a very interesting question. In Lagos, for example, if you do an analysis of how people spend their time, I think in most instances, you find out that people actually spend more time in the office than in any other place. Maybe the second will be sleeping when they get home. And of course, you can add traffic, except in recent times when the fuel issue has sort of affected traffic. So when people spend long hours in the same environment, often enclosed, it brings this connection. Of course, people, when they are together, they begin to share personal information. I'll tell you an experience. I was in a meeting when I joined an organization, and I just saw the people tittering, you know, laughing and this thing. And they all sitting, and there was nothing was being said. That was the era of BlackBerry. Is that BlackBerry, right? That was BlackBerry. Actually, they were chatting with each other and joking and laughing to themselves. It took me some time, because that time I didn't have a BlackBerry, by the way. I then understood that people connect in so digitally communication. They can be in board meeting and they are chatting, WhatsApp, they are exchanging jokes. So that's one of them. Of course, team dynamics. You look at a function like IT. Sometime towards the end of the month, for example, in the financial sector, they used to have this, they have to run the books, as they used to call it. I don't know whether they do so now because I've left that sector. But the reality was that they could spend like 4 or 5 days inside that room. And incidentally, one of the members of the team was a female. And I used to think years back then that this is interesting. I hope it is okay for one female with 3 guys to stay in the office morning till night, day after day, because in my mind, it sort of talks about the fact that teams are important, but we also have to be aware of how we set them up and the dynamics as well. And I think that office flirting is also one of them. People flirt. And that is, you know, they have office husband, office wife, and they do all sorts of things. So, of course, those are some of the factors. Then attraction, people just get attracted to each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that contribution. I'd like to turn my attention to Chief Adeniji. What should a boss or a manager do if he or she feels genuinely attracted to a colleague? You are muted, sir. Can you unmute yourself?
All right, I think I've done it. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so thank you, Shola, for the question. And I also want to thank Uche for setting the tone. Right. Treating your question, the first thing that needs to be borne in mind is the theory of power dynamics. And what that means is that the one with the higher authority is deemed to have the power and the clout. So where there is an attraction between, like you said, a boss and another person in the workplace, the first thing that has to be borne in mind is who has authority. Because if, for example, it is between, let's say, for the purpose of this discussion, myself and somebody who is junior to me in the organization, I will be deemed to be the one with the power of coercion. I mean, I could, for example, promote. I could, for example, give benefits that otherwise should not have come. So we need to bear that in mind and always to be cautious. Like Uche said, the purpose of this is for us to know how to handle such situations. It is not possible for people who work in the same environment with the way things are these days, for there not to be people who will feel attracted to each other. So where you are free, that is, you are not encumbered by marriage or anything like that, and you have another colleague in the office who is also free, the first thing you need to bear in mind will be the optics. How will people look at such a relationship? The second thing is to ask yourself, where I work, this workspace, does it have a policy against this kind of liaison? There are some organizations that have it embedded in their work policy guidelines that there cannot be an amorous relationship between one staff and the other. So you need to check if that is against the guidelines of where you work. Secondly, if such a guideline does not exist, then you need to understand that having a relationship in the workspace will bring with it all the quote and unquote drama that comes with relationships. And you know, both of you need to sit down and work out whether work will be work and play will be play after working hours. Then where it is such that people will raise eyebrows to such a relationship, for example, if I am the managing director of an organization and I feel attracted to a young person, and you think the draw and the pull is so much, what you can do in such a situation is to get that person out of your working space, out of your working environment, because again, impressions matter a lot. So those are the things I believe that we can do once we have that possibility of attraction. Of course, you can always discuss this with a mentor or with an advisor so that good counsel can be offered in the situation. Thank you, Shola.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder that you can drop your comments and your questions in the chat box and we'll take it at interval. And those whose mic are not muted should please kindly mute your mic. Thank you. Now, I'd like to ask Mrs. Makinde if she can share with us if there are any laws that addresses the issue of sexual harassment, hormones, dating in the workplace.
All right. Thank you very much, Shola. And thank you to my the previous speakers. Yes, indeed, there are laws. First, we have the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, which speaks to issues of sexual harassment, the fundamental human rights of victims, and specifically rights to the dignity of the human person. We have the Criminal Code, we have the Penal Code, and some states also have sexual and gender-based violence laws. But bringing it home, we also have sectoral codes of conduct, business conduct and ethics. So I'll speak about the CIBN sectoral code, and I'm going to read an excerpt of this code. It says, members of either sex shall not sexually or otherwise harass each other. Sexual harassment shall include but not be limited to situations where a member employee uses or attempts to use his or her position to seek, obtain sexual gratification from another, or who may succumb in fear of adverse consequences on his or her employment business. But it's also important to note, because, you know, one of the things we want to do on this call is to be practical. It's also important to note that we cannot legislate fully issues about emotions. You would see that most of the laws, the codes, everything, even the international treaty with the International Labour Organization Convention 190, you would see everything speaks about sexual harassment. Nothing says emotions. You know, you cannot legislate when you get attracted to someone. We cannot legislate that. And that is why it's important that organizations, just like Chief mentioned, that organizations now put in place guidelines and boundaries that can guide people. I can assure you that I have seen previous colleagues in places I have worked that have gotten married. Whilst they were in employment, people knew they were dating, you know, although they were a par, employee to employee. You know, people knew they were dating. And after a while, one of them had to excuse the organization. And today they are happily married. and great alumni of the organization, you know. But when it comes to a senior and a junior staff, then the dynamics start to change, just like has been mentioned earlier. So indeed, there are laws, there are codes, there are guidelines, but you cannot legislate fully the issues of emotions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Makinde, for this contribution. I'd like to ask Mr. Uwechia this question. We've spoken about employer-employee dynamics. Now, I'd like to ask, does this same rule apply to board members? The same rule of employer-employee, does it apply to board members as well?
Yes, of necessity. Because if you look at the theory of corporate, organic theory of the corporation, there are two critical power points. That's the shareholders in general meeting and the board. So if you're a director, you don't have to be an employee to be bound by this rule. So I think that's very clear. In fact, we will hold you to a higher level of responsibility. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. So as company secretary, how, I'm bringing it home down to us, as company secretaries, how are we to handle instances of inappropriate advances where such arises? I'd like to ask, anybody can take this question.
Well, let me take a bite of the cherry, since I've just spoken, and I have seen it. Sometimes you also have to look at the dynamics of the board. For example, as company secretary, you see a lot, and people tend to come to you to raise issues. I think basically the first thing, as Chief Adeniji earlier pointed out, is to ensure that we have the rules in place. There are rules, and those rules must be obeyed. However, I used to think that sometimes we also have to look at not just the letter of the law, but the spirit. When people have issues, they should discuss them. And I think that often we find that issue of emotions, issue of intimacy in the workplace only comes to fore when it becomes a problem. And I think that as wise people, as astute governance professionals, we should not allow those issues to get to that point, because it's almost impossible for two people in an organization to be having a relationship and nobody knows. It's almost impossible, because you will see the telltale signs, the looking, the longing, the telling. You know what I mean? You know, people will know that Oga A and so, something is going on. What we want to encourage is that people should speak up so that we can address the challenge before it becomes a monster. If, for example, Manager A is seen to be, Manager A, it seems to be sort of showing undue inclination, somebody should call his attention and say, excuse me, it appears, we are not saying you are doing anything wrong, but it appears. So that kind of warning, early warning signals. And when people are having emotional issues, in the organization where I worked, we have employee assistance program, where if you're having distress, if you're having challenges. So I do not see any reason why people cannot share, should be encouraged to share their challenges so that it can be addressed. It can be advised that maybe you have to look for another job quietly so that you can pursue this relationship, because if you are here, you cannot pursue this relationship. Of course, the rules must be very clear, but we should endeavor now, not just to be pulling out the rule, but to have conversation with people so that we can help as quickly as possible. Thank you, Shola.
Shola, if I may also address
comment. Okay.
Yes, Shola.
Yes, I was just going to add to what Uche said, that if the dynamics is between directors on the board, the directors should be aware of their fiduciary duty to the company in such a way that the interest of the company is not adversely affected. And I would like to share a personal experience in this regard, without mentioning names or situation. I was company secretary to a company, a public liability company. And this kind of dynamics happened between two directors. Unfortunately for them, the woman involved was chair of the risk management committee. The director involved was the executive director in charge of finance. So it so happened that because of their liaison, the proper oversight that ought to have been carried out by the risk management committee was not carried out. Ultimately, this led to a lot of issues for the company financially, and it adversely affected the company in the long run. So these are the things that we need to be aware of if people who are in fiduciary relationship to a company decide to be emotionally entangled. I just thought I should chip that in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I'd like to take some comments from the chat box. So Mrs. Tinuke stated that lovely deliberation so far. I'd like to point out that the focus is specifically on male superior at work. Sometimes the case is different where it's a female superior to a junior male, okay? Point taken. Joseph Aketu says, I honestly do not agree that it is possible to have a healthy, amorous relationship between a superior and a subordinate. Regardless of the good intentions of the superior, it is difficult, verily, if really consent has been given. This consent does not arise where the parties are of the same level. That's Joseph's point. Then someone asks a question. What are the major or likely negative effects of such relationship in an organization? I'd like Mrs. Makinde to please help us take that question.
All right, thank you very much. And as pointed out, really, these dynamics we're speaking about can be between male, female, male, in fact, female. The dynamics can just be as wide as we can think. So now, what are the disadvantages? Now, in a normal relationship, outside of work, there are times both of you are not on the same path. Both of you, there is an issue, you have a lover's tiff and all of that. It's, communication suffers normally. Now, imagine that in a workplace. Imagine we are on a team together, we are handling a project together, and then, we are now fighting, and we are lovers. It's of course, that project would suffer. More so, if we look at the Ejike Maduka matter against Microsoft, the organization was held, there was a charge that the organization should be vicariously liable. So it can spin to the organization in that even though Microsoft carried out an investigation, it was said that the complainant was not invited into that process. It was said that a report was also not given back to the complainant about the complaint she made of wrongful dismissal because sexual advances were made to her by a superior. So it can have negative impact on the organization. You see, Uche mentioned something earlier. It is when it is bad that the organization comes in. When it is good, you don't see people clapping on social media. And in this regime of Me Too, organizations must be extremely careful and set the ground rules clearly, because the organization has more to lose than to gain if things blow up. We remember the issue of Monica Lewinsky and President, what's his name, Bill Clinton. You understand? You can see the uproar it generated even at that point. So the institution has a lot to lose. There's a lot of disadvantage to the organization. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, ma'am. So Mrs. Olubukola is saying that it can never be a healthy relationship, and the company is at the grass. The company is the grass that will suffer the adverse effect. Okay. Then Mrs. Adefowoke, apologies for the way I pronounce the name, said the Nigerian Bar Association also has sexual harassment policies drafted and launched in 2021. Thank you very much. Now, over to some other questions. We've been talking about the negatives, so I wanted to be sure that, is there anything wrong with dating a colleague in a corporate setting or in a board setting? I'd like Chief Adewale Adeniji to answer this question for us, please.
Is there anything wrong?
Yes.
Okay. I would say there are things wrong and there are things right. But since you asked from the negative perspective, just like I mentioned earlier, and Mrs. Makinde also mentioned, the negatives to the company would include work not going on as it ought to, checks and balances not carried out as they ought to, and several other things. For example, within workers who know that Mr. A and Mrs. Y are in a relationship, or Mr. A and Miss Y, let's put it at that, are in a relationship, there is likely to be crossfires. All right, now let me share this experience. Two young people who are not encumbered by marriage are in a relationship in a company. And the young man is a likable person. Everybody likes to associate with him. And there were other ladies who were secretly hoping he will have a relationship with them. Now, it so happens that one of the people with whom he chose not to have a relationship was the direct boss of the woman he decided to have a relationship with. Now, you can imagine what happened to that woman. Eventually, she was fired, and she went to court claiming discrimination. I was the counsel that the company engaged to defend that company at the industrial court. Now, having mentioned the court, I don't need to tell you what the outcome was, because, I mean, we all know what will happen at the National Industrial Court. Now, when I was interviewing or interrogating the facts, I discovered that that young man had spread his oaths around the office because he was a likable young man. So the woman who was boss felt slighted and felt that, look, I need to do something. So that is a negative to the company. It disrupts work dynamics if it is not properly managed. Thank you, Shola.
Thank you very much. I'd like Mr. Uwechia to please tell us, are there positive angles to this? Since we've discussed about the negative, are there, if any, positive angles to dating a colleague?
The answer is yes. Certainly there are positives. Take for example, the age dynamics of our current situation, where people graduate at 21 and they join an organization and they meet a likable other half. It would be wicked for an organization to say, because you are working, we kill your future, we kill your ability, we kill the possibility of you marrying this person. Remember, the two of them are, as Mrs. Makinde pointed out in one of her instances, they are at par. So one is not the director and the other one is the intern or the fresh hire. They joined. Maybe they even came together in the recruitment circle. They did their internship together, they did their circulation together, and they just found out that they like each other. And they think that this like can lead to forever. Organizations should have a way of ensuring, subject to the caveat raised by Chief Adeniji, that these people should be encouraged to move on in their love life and even retain them in the organization. I want to remind you that some of the richest men in the world worked with their spouses. They married their spouses in the organization, including Bill Gates. Then we are working together in the same organization, and they got married. And in America today, they are trying to encourage people without destroying the work structure. So they make sure that the HR will make sure that the structure, the organizational structure is such that the example that Chief Adeniji gave will not arise. And then it is known. You see, transparency is important. Part of the challenge we have is that because we have made sex taboo or intimacy taboo, people then do it in corners, in secret places, which ought not to be. When two young people who are of marriageable age, who love each other, the only accident is that they are working in the same organization. Why should that be a negative? So I will answer the question, yes, subject, of course, to the caveats that we have raised. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Patricia dropped a comment saying that this relationship can become messy, especially when there is a breakup. It could also lead to toxic work environment with other employees being forced to manage emotions and sensitivities. I agree with that statement. Then I'd like to ask Mrs. Makinde this question. So, as company secretaries, how do you handle comments, inappropriate comments being passed around in boardrooms? So you're in a meeting and then probably one of the directors makes a comment or a passing joke that is kind of, or you find offensive. So how do you manage such comments while still maintaining the composure as a company secretary?
All right, thank you very much. You know, we already noted that these dynamics we're speaking to can be from any gender, and it can be to any gender. How would we handle it outside of the boardroom? Number one. So the way you would handle it outside of the boardroom, the way you would handle it in a proper corporate setting is the same manner it should be handled even on the board. If lewd jokes are passed around and you join in laughing, you join in, it is deemed that you are okay. There are some situations that not the boardroom at this time, maybe outside. The first thing they will say, Mama Yad, somebody will just say, Mama Yad, sorry, I'm going to use this word I want to use. Because people already know you for who you are. We want to be practical. Now, if lewd language is being used, somebody is using the F word, somebody is, passing, and you join in laughing and relaxing your body language to it, then it may be a challenge to even rise up to say, oh no, I can't take this. But you see, as a professional, like I noted, there is a code of business conduct. Professionalism is important at every point, on the board, outside of the board. If board members are passing lewd jokes, it is important that your body language shows that you even can raise it. You can raise, there's a governance structure in an organization, even on the board, there's a governance structure. You can meet the chairman of the governance committee to say, oh, I do not like this. This has gone on for too long. And then the governance committee chairman can find a way to, slip it into deliberations of the board, and, everybody would just generally organize each other, or you speak to the chairman about it. But it's important that you do not join in, male or female, does not matter, that you do not join in. Your body language refuses it, and you are firm about how you react to such matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know that Mr. Uwechia has already taken a bite at this question, but I'd like to throw it to Chief Adewale Adeniji. Should companies encourage or discourage dating among colleagues? I'd like your opinion, sir.
Hey, I'm of an older generation. Apologies. So, like Uche would always read me, my time don't pass. When we were younger, it was a no-no. I remember a situation where a brilliant young man lost his career because he just wouldn't have it. I'm talking about the late 80s, early 90s. He, of course, went on to do very good things for himself to the detriment of the company. But because of this generation we are at, you cannot legislate against it. And I think Mrs. Makinde mentioned that earlier on. It's not possible. So what the company should do will be to have firm strictures in place. For example, if it's a big organization, it could be said that, look, if you are in the same department, then one of you has to be transferred out. If there are outstations, you pick an outstation where you will go to. Do that or you lose your job. Because really and truly, and I think Mr. Uwechia mentioned this, it is unfair, it will be unfair for you to say, look, you cannot have, because there will be life after work, wouldn't there? And if two young people decide they want to spend the rest of their lives together, a corporation should not get in between. But again, we have to balance the interest of the corporation and put in place strict measures where, like I think Mrs. Makinde mentioned, there won't be emotional issues all over the place. And trust me, honestly, when these emotional issues come, usually the HR person will not be able to handle it because it might just be beyond what they have the capacity to handle. So it's better to say, look, yes, you can do it, but not within the same corporate environment.
Thank you very much. So someone dropped a comment, Mr. Uche dropped a comment and said many international organizations such as the UN, ECOWAS and the likes now allow those kind of relationship, even spouse, but not in the same department with close proximity. Okay. And Mr. Adebayo says the negative aspects is enormous. Because we have run out of time and would like to keep to the 1 hour section, I'd like to thank our moderator. I'd like to thank our participants for still staying tuned. I'd like to thank our discussants for sharing their opinion. And I'd also like to emphasize that this is not a male, female, it's not compulsory, it must be the men making the advances. Sometimes it could be the female making the advances. And these are just our general opinions. So you might have a different opinion. This is not a stricto sensu rule. So at this juncture, I'd like to welcome the chair of the Lagos State branch, the ICSAN Lagos State branch, Mr. Femi Shokan, to probably give us a little bit comments. He might have some comments to make on these topics, and then after which he'll give us his closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Moderator Shola. And I say a very good morning to everybody. And I want to thank all the speakers, the panelists. They've done a very good job this morning to the topic we have before us, sex in the boardroom. This is the maiden edition of this program. And by God's grace, it's going to be something that the Lagos State chapter will be bringing in on a quarterly basis. I mean, topics that, you know, that are ongoing. I want to appreciate all those who have commented on the chat box, and it's a very dicey thing. I mean, the arguments are being for and against. I mean, if two people, you know, God says they're going to meet up at the at their organization level, what God has joined together, do we say that let no company, office, organization put asunder? But then the corporate governance area is the one that really we are, you know, looking at today, and I believe that a lot of justice has been done to that. So I say a very big thank you to all the panelists, the speakers, and all the participants online for your comments and things like that. And I want to say to us that expect more of this, you know, kind of topics that will be very engaging And I also want to encourage us that we can still put a comment on the platform of the Lagos State chapter, and I believe that it will be well attended to. Just before I go, I just want to recognize the presence of some of the council members. I can see Ms. Ronke Opajobi, FCIS. Thank you very much, Ma, for coming on. And I sat through, I can't say, but if I missed out anyone, we say thank you to you all, our elders, for being online. Just before I go, I want to remind us that our national conference is coming up, the 47th annual conference of ICSAN, and our dinner. The title is, the topic is Sound Governance as a Cursor to Thriving Economy, a Case for Inclusiveness. This is coming up on the 21st of September. That's the conference, 10 a.m. at the Museum Center Shell Hall. And on the 22nd of September, 4 p.m. is the dinner. I wouldn't want to miss it for anything. So I encourage us, please, check on the ICSAN platform and you get the details there. Also, I want to remind us, as Lagos State chapter, we'll be having our annual conference coming up in October. That's precisely 17th of October at the Civic Center at Victoria Island. And the topic for the conference is Adopting Sustainability and Governance for Nigeria's Economic Growth. We have carefully selected all our speakers, and we believe that it's going to be a very impactful program. And many more of these will be on the way. Once again, I want to thank everybody, and we hope to see you again at the next discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we go, since we have a little bit of time, I'd like to yield the floor to our chair, the chair of the Education Committee, to please give us our thoughts on this very exciting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shola. My thoughts, I think they've all said it. Uche, Chief Adeniji, Bola, I think they did an excellent job dissecting this topic and just giving us, both the pros and the cons. And I'm also happy to say that there was a lot of interaction, just going by the comment section, people had quite a bit to say, and, they were able to air their views. So thank you to our chief speaker, Uche. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Mr. Chair of our Lagos chapter, for your support, while planning and putting this together. And thank you to all of you for taking time out of your busy day, to be here with us. As I said in my opening remarks, the essence of this is just to have these topical conversations, that will push our profession forward, because there is really no reason to hide our heads in the sand and behave like, oh, we're all prim and proper in a certain way, and these conversations have no place, in corporate spaces. As has been said over and over, transparency is key. When we talk about these things, as they say, a problem shared is a problem half solved or solved. So as we bring up these issues, we'll have more engaging conversations. I would also like to appeal, if you would like to join the Education Committee of the Lagos State chapter, please get in touch. You can get in touch with myself, or you can get in touch with Julie, to join this. And if you have any topics that you really want us to dissect in this learning hub, please get in touch as well. Thank you all so much for, for your time and for taking time out of your busy days. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all. We've come to an end. Please do have a wonderful day, and thank you for joining. Oh, we can see a hand raised up. Someone, Mrs. Omokoshi, please pardon the way I pronounce the name. I think she would like to make a comment.
I'm clapping. I'm clapping.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.